Well, folks, today we have some very interesting rumors regarding the new Joy-Con that we might be seeing on the Nintendo Switch 2. This is coming from the Spanish website Vandal, which I'll admit I was unfamiliar with up until this point. However, after doing some research, it looks like they were one of the outlets that were pretty right on the money regarding the Switch OLED back in 2021. Let's get into it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games. Today, I wanted to hop on here and talk about all of these magnetic Joy-Con rumors that are going around on the internet today. This is the talk of the town for Nintendo right now. So, like I said, this is all coming from Vandal, a Spanish website. So, I'll have all of this linked down in the description so you can check it out for yourself. But we'll start with the new article, and then we'll talk about their validity and whether or not we should believe this information, and also just kind of discuss the implications here for Nintendo Switch 2 and if there will be some new magnetic Joy-Con and how that's actually very exciting for a couple of different reasons. So we'll go through the article first. This is Google translated through, Chrome or whatever. So I kind of take this translation with a little bit of a grain of salt, but the article reads this: a larger Switch with magnetic Joy-Con, and that will not arrive in 2024. The Switch 2 information comes from accessory manufacturers who have been able to touch the new Nintendo console. The company would have allowed them to put their hands in an opaque box so that they can understand its dimensions and design without compromising the secrecy surrounding any new video game hardware. Thanks to that, we know that it will be larger than the Switch, although without reaching the size of the Steam Deck. So we're, based on this, expecting a bit of a larger form factor for the console, for the device itself, but smaller than the Steam Deck, so somewhere in between. I think that's fine, as long as the screen's a little bit bigger. That's all I really want, so that would assume, mean a pretty darn thin bezel here. That opaque box thing is very interesting, though. We'll circle back to that, but that actually makes me believe this whole thing. Like, that specific part of this rumor or leak makes me think it's all the more legitimate. But continuing on here, it has also been learned that Nintendo could have opted to maintain the Switch Joy-Con, but with a fundamental change in its design. Instead of the rails of the current console, the new Switch 2 controllers would join the screen of magnetic form, or they would attach magnetically, basically. We've seen a lot of magnets going on in tech these days, like the MagSafe chargers for Apple devices, that kind of thing. But if they can design a very sturdy way to connect the Joy-Con to the Switch hardware unit itself and make that more sturdy than the rails, that's a great thing. Because I personally haven't had this issue, but I do see a lot of posts online of people complaining about the Joy-Con rails and how they're not very reliable, they can break, that kind of thing. And it also just makes the Joy-Con kind of feel cheap. Like, when you're holding your Switch, if you wiggle them, you can feel a little bit of wiggle. Ideally, I don't know how strong these magnets are. I'm not a tech expert. I don't know exactly how this would work, but theoretically, these magnets would be strong enough to the point where that's not really going to be an issue. But reading through the rest of the article here, this would make its full compatibility with the current Joy-Con difficult, although what is said is that the Pro controllers of the current Nintendo Switch would be compatible with the new console. There has been no talk about backwards compatibility for the system itself to these sources, but manufacturers believe and assume that Switch games will be playable on Switch 2, which makes sense. If the current Switch Pro controller is compatible with the Switch 2, you can assume Switch 1 games would be playable on Switch 2. I don't really think we need like sources on that. I think most people are just kind of expecting it to be backwards compatible. And if it's not backwards compatible, that's possibly one of the biggest L's Nintendo will ever take. And then finally, regarding its possible release date, what the accessory manufacturers say is that Nintendo would already have the console ready to put on the market, but that they prefer to wait to put it on sale with a more powerful catalog. This would imply that we would not see Switch 2 this year, but at the beginning of 2025, as many rumors already suggested. So kind of just following up on what we've been hearing, that supposedly it was originally planned to release in 2024, or at least there were some internal plans there from Nintendo and kind of telling their partners like, hey, we're aiming for 2024, but it's being pushed to 2025 so that they can have time to get software ready, which is actually, one of the reasons I've always been saying it would release in 2025. It makes more sense from a development perspective based on what games they've released in the past like 2 or 3 years, that they would want to have a little bit more time to get that first party lineup ready for the Switch 2, that first party pipeline, not just 1 or 2 games. 3D Mario and Mario Kart, those are, I would safely say, are probably close to being ready, if not ready entirely, but it's the other games. It's the Animal Crossing team with the new Animal Crossing game. It's Sakurai with the new Smash Bros, right? It's not just 1 or 2 games, it's this entire pipeline. So if they think pushing it to early 2025 is enough to give them a little bit of a head start on software so we have a banger first year, I think that's totally worth it. So let's talk a little bit more about the Joy-Con here. That is the main thing kind of talked about in this article alongside the size of the hardware. Joy-Con being attached magnetically. Like, now, like I said, I'm not an expert on hardware. I don't know how believable that is. However, my first thought was, well, first of all, if that makes it more sturdy, fantastic, because even though I've never really had an issue with the Joy-Con rails itself or themselves, there is that little bit of wobble, right? If you're playing in handheld mode, which I do play in handheld mode quite a bit, there is a little bit of wiggle to the Joy-Con. Even like a brand new Nintendo Switch, it's not even just a thing that happens after years of use. Like, no, even a brand new pair of Joy-Con, eventually that rail just kind of, you know, deteriorates. It wears down. That is going to happen when you're detaching these Joy-Con off and on, you know, hundreds of times over the course of a year or two. So if it's magnetic, and assuming these magnets don't, you know, get weaker over time, this is nothing but a good thing. It also to me says that if we are getting these new magnetic Joy-Con, that Nintendo is making entirely new Joy-Con, which would theoretically eliminate drift entirely, which is possibly the biggest design flaw with the Switch, I would say, right? Like, that is, I would say, the main complaint people have with the hardware. Not that it's underpowered, not that the Joy-Con are even uncomfortable, but that they drift. So if we're getting these new Joy-Con and they're making it so you can't carry old Joy-Con forward, at least not in a, you know, attachable form, they're forcing you to get these new magnetic Joy-Con. Yeah, that's kind of annoying, but also, if they're getting rid of Joy-Con drift, I think that's a good thing. If they're leaving that flawed design of the original Joy-Con in the past and giving us these new, hopefully more comfortable, maybe there's like a little bit of a grip on the back, that kind of thing. If they're giving us these new Joy-Con, hopefully there won't be drift. That was my second thought. My third thought is that these will probably still work with the Switch 2, or the original Joy-Con, I should say. They won't be able to connect physically, like they won't be able to be attached to the Switch, but I definitely think you'd still be able to attach them wirelessly for a game of Super Mario Party, for example, if you're playing that backwards compatible, or really just any other motion-based games, although it does make me, you know, question what else will they add to these new Joy-Con? Like, will the IR sensor still be there? Would you be able to use these for Nintendo Labo? And what other bells and whistles might Nintendo add? Will they still be focusing on the idea that you're going to be detaching these Joy-Con often, or will that kind of take a back seat? If they're really focusing on this magnet thing, that makes me think they're going to double down on having it be that you're passing around controllers. And my other thought when reading all of this was the, once again, Nintendo Attach rumors from last month, or really just the name popping up in that YouTube survey. But the idea was always there that maybe the Switch 2 would have two screens, and maybe you would attach that second screen. I know that's like an outlandish idea, but it feels so Nintendo. Having two screens feels very, very Nintendo. That is my pie in the sky, because I want them to be able to, you know, put DS games on NSO. I think there's a lot of cool things that they can do with dual screen gaming still. Of course, Wii U games could be easier ported, the like 3 that are left, right? I just feel like there's a lot of applications from Nintendo for having two screens. Like, that would be very cool. I don't know how third parties would feel about it, but if we're really focusing on magnets, like if maybe it's called the Nintendo Switch Magnetica or something, I don't freaking know. But if we're focusing on magnets, and on the side of the Switch, you know, on either side of the screen, there's magnets for the Joy-Con, maybe there's something on the top of the Switch for the second screen. Just an idea. If we're really going on this whole Nintendo Attach thought process here, that's not very likely, but I do hope that there is a second screen on this thing, because I like when Nintendo is a little bit goofy in their hardware design. And as for the size of the Switch 2, if this ends up being true, a little bit bigger than the current Switch but less big than the Steam Deck, I think that sounds perfectly fine. I've held a Steam Deck. It's pretty unwieldy, but I also play on my PS Portal a lot in bed, and that's also way bigger, so I'd be fine with a Steam Deck or a slightly less than a Steam Deck sized Nintendo Switch. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the beginning of this report, where they talk about how accessory manufacturers have held the console but not seen the console, which I find very intriguing as someone who loves, you know, speculating and looking at leaks and theorizing about how all this stuff happens and how all these pieces come together. So here's what they said. The Switch 2 information comes from accessory manufacturers who have been able to touch the new Nintendo console. The company would have allowed them to put their hands in an opaque box so that they can understand its dimensions and design without compromising the secrecy surrounding any new video game hardware. That is very interesting to me, because that sounds like such a stupid thing. Why would they let them touch the console through an opaque box? It's like the thing in Dune where he puts his hand in the little box, right? It's like, what? That doesn't sound real. Like, that sounds so fake. But it's that specific line in this report that makes me believe this. So, in huge credit to users on Fami boards, they dug this up here. game companies have done this in the past to kind of, hide what they're working on. So this comes from the Star Wars Shadows of the Empire Wikipedia. This is on the Wikipedia here. It says, for a prototype controller with which to test the game, they were delivered a modified SNES controller with a primitive analog joystick and Z trigger designed by Konami. For maximal secrecy under strict non-disclosure agreement, the core team was not allowed to speak to anyone else about the hardware or the project, and the controller prototype was concealed within a cardboard box so that the team members could place their hands into it and play it without looking at it and seeing what would end up being a very rough prototype of the N64 controller. That is a Nintendo 64 game. So this is not unheard of, basically, is the point. And I don't know why Vandal, this supposedly reliable Spanish, outlet, why they would make that specific thing up. That is very, hyper specific. And it does sound like something Nintendo would do, considering how secretive they've been of the Switch 2 so far up to this point. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is Vandal's reliability in general, and that they were one of the most reliable sources when it came to the Switch OLED, or in this case, the Switch Pro, back when they were reporting it in May 2021. They got basically all of the details of the hardware down exactly, including the new dock with its Ethernet port, the new size of the screen, the OLED panel, the fact that while the screen would be bigger and while it would be OLED, the actual hardware form factor would be the exact same. It got the new kickstand right. They basically got everything right about the Switch OLED back in May 2021 before anyone else. The only thing they got really wrong here was the fact that they said it would offer 4K image output, which I do believe is technically true of the Switch dock or the Switch OLED, but it's obviously not used. So there is a precedent for the Spanish, websites to leak hardware and size and dimensions and specifics like this for Nintendo hardware. They have a track record of doing it and doing so reliably, which makes me think that this report about the Switch 2 is accurate. I do believe this. Now, obviously, take it with a grain of salt, and frankly, there's nothing that groundbreaking here. It is just magnetic Joy-Con, which is exciting, for all the reasons I already mentioned of, we're getting new Joy-Con, hopefully that eliminates drift, but also the fact that it'll be a little bit bigger. It'll be closer to a Steam Deck, but not quite there, and the screen will be bigger as well. And then, of course, at the end of the article, they also reiterate not releasing until 2025, or at least that is likely what's happening. So yeah, very interesting stuff. I think a lot of people are looking at this and thinking, oh, it's time for stuff to start really ramping up. If accessory manufacturers have gotten their hands on the console, I think that's a good sign, even if they haven't seen it. That means things are happening, behind the scenes. People are getting their hands on with this console. It's just a matter of time until we actually see the dang thing, which, as I mentioned in a video 2 days ago, I do think we could still see an announcement by May 7th, so within less than 2 weeks here. Even if it is just a press release or a codename drop during their investor meeting, I do think we're going to start hearing more and more about the Switch 2, and of course I will be there to cover it, because now that we're past all of the 2022, 2023 early rumblings of it, which I found very obnoxious, quite frankly, we're actually getting closer to this thing releasing, and I'm definitely going to be getting more and more excited as we get closer to that theoretical reveal of Nintendo's next generation device. So I'll be covering it for you all, of course, on this YouTube channel. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of this magnetic Joy-Con rumor from Vandal? Once again, I'll have sources linked down below so you can check it out for yourself. But of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch news, reviews, coverage, all of that stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. And until next time, folks, peace.